Okay, so let's start here in our UI and just demonstrate that we have a start sprinkler button that currently doesn't do anything. And in this step, what we're going to do is we're going to create a status, a bit of status text on our UI that will indicate whether or not the sprinkler is on. It'll count down for the duration that we set in our last video, and then stop once that countdown is done. So I'm going to drag a countdown node onto a workspace. And I'm going to change this name to something a little bit more useful. I'm going to say turn sprinkler on for a duration. And that's all I can configure in here. Note that there is some logic that's going on under the hood. If I go to edit subflow template, I'll see that there are several things actually that make up this particular node. We're not going to worry about those right now. We'll get into subflows later. But just know that there is a few things happening behind the scenes with this countdown node. So make sure our name change stuck. It did. And let's now add a sprinkler status label. So let's drag in a text node just to display some text. And let's configure this. And let's put it into our group and tab with everything else. Give it a size of 4x1. And for a label, this is what's going to show up next to or above the status. Let's give it a useful label like sprinkler status. Keep the value as it is. I'm going to choose a layout where I put the label above the value. We'll see what that looks like on the user interface. Click Done. And now let's connect both of my outputs from the countdown to my sprinkler status here. And if I take a look, it looks like this needs to be connected as well, so let's do that now. And lastly, let's add a comment and just describe what we're doing here. So I'm just going to paste in some of the text that is in the course. It says I'm going to turn on the sprinkler via the start sprinkler button. The sprinkler will run for the amount of time defined in our duration variable. So let's say start sprinkler for a duration. Done. Now, let's take a look at this. So if I deploy and I go to my UI, I'll see that I have this label here, and now my start sprinkler button should control that. And sure enough, it turns on, it runs for 5 seconds, and then it notifies me that it's stopped. So that is working. However, commonly, when we're doing this kind of thing, we'll have to debug a bit, and it's easier to debug from the back end and be able to view things in our debug window as opposed to essentially guess and check by going through the user interface. So let's do a couple things. Let's move this over a little bit, and let's drag in an inject node. And connect it to our start sprinkler node. And we're going to make one change in our start sprinkler. We're going to say if a message arrives on the input, emulate a button click. So this will allow us to test our flow from the back end as opposed to only from the front end. Let's also add a couple debug nodes. I'm going to add 2 debug nodes for the 2 outputs that I have coming out of this countdown timer node. So I'm going to say connect the first one to that one, second one there, and let's deploy my changes now. And make sure our debug window is clear. And now, as opposed to running this flow from our user interface, let's run it from our workspace. So I click inject, I can see right here that it's updating my remaining seconds, and then in our debug window, I can see correctly that the sprinkler is starting, it goes through the countdown timer, and it ends, and I can see if I hover over these, notice the orange outline over that first debug node. The countdown is the second output, so that's now outlining that second debug node. And then the stop status, again, is that first debug node. So that kind of indicates to us what is what are the outputs for this countdown node here. Let's just confirm our GUI one more time. Start the sprinkler, it starts, gives me a countdown, and stops, which is exactly what we want.